This is also compared to the fact that the Western countries destroy the sovereign developing Libya. As we know, in 2011, the Libyan state was destroyed. The country had sanctions levied against it, and the Belgian fund Euroclear today it still holds 15 billion euros, which belongs to the Libyan Investment Authority.
We have continuously highlighted how most of African countries have been taken advantage of by Western nations, especially United States and those countries like France and United Kingdom who have perpetuated their bad activities within the African continent. One good example is Libya. Libya was invaded by America and NATO, and one thing that they did is that they killed Muammar Gaddafi to ensure that the desire of Libyan people and African people to have a one united continent that was championed by Muammar Gaddafi could not come into fruition. But one thing is being revealed now. There was this meeting at United Nations Security Council that called together member states, and they discussed issues ranging from security and all other things that are affecting the globe today. But one thing that caught my eye is the expose by a Russian representative of how European countries have been fleecing African countries. For example, he exposed that Libya, immediately after the death of Muammar Gaddafi, many of the resources that were in Libya were taken up and stolen by these Western nations that called themselves prefects of democracy, who thought that Muammar Gaddafi was a threat to existence of a democratic state in Libya. So let's watch this expose, then come back and share our thoughts together.
The Libyan political process remains at an impasse. So far, we are not seeing a prospect of any kind of a tangible progress. The constitutional track of negotiations between the House of Representatives and the High Council of State. The status quo under current conditions is tantamount to political process stagnation, continued political crisis and continued disunity for an indefinite period of time. This will inevitably be followed by further deterioration in security and economics and the deterioration of the standard of living of the people. The situation is close to critical, and this will probably not change unless there's close work with Libyan parties on the part of the international community. It's important to ensure that there is an inclusive political process, Libyan-led and Libyan-owned, with the participation of all respected political forces, so as to come up with acceptable solutions. And this also includes the representatives of former authorities. The plans for Libya should be long-term and make their cornerstone the well-being of the Libyan people entirely, rather than discussing the specific interests of a separate group or a particular actor. We also should avoid artificial deadlines and formulas imposed from outside. Mr. President, Russia shared the international consensus according to which the UN is to play the central role in Libyan settlement. We would like to underscore our heartfelt support to the key element of this configuration, the UN mission in Libya. That is, at the same time, we also know the positive contribution made by parallel initiatives by regional countries. Given that the UN mediation is stalling, their determination to contribute to the future of Libya is perfectly understandable. We would like to hope that ultimately overall efforts by everyone will help overcome the which has arisen amongst Libyan actors, which arose in 2011 after the NATO aggression. We are convinced that at the current stage, any states which would help to restore the country would be welcome. Mr. President, the continued internal crisis and split in Libya make the security situation on the ground very fragile, and we have an opportunity to see this on many an occasion in recent months. The fact that the main issue is not resolved, the issue of consolidating of political power, helps make sure that additional actors arise because they are desperate and do not think that the solution is coming up soon. When it comes to eliminating the foreign military presence in the country, we've always advocated a synchronized, balanced, gradual and step-by-step withdrawal of all non-Libyan armed groups and armed units, in the course of which the current balance of forces is not to be upset. Mr. President, We're most concerned by the current practice of attempts made at the Libyan assets, which are frozen under sanctions regime by the unscrupulous Western banks and financial institutions, which we've seen many times. We cannot close eyes to the fact that sometimes their lead is followed by the national governments who are simply trying to get to make the nationals possible to make some income. And this is also compared to the fact that the Western countries destroy the sovereign developing Libya. As we know, in 2011, the Libyan state was destroyed. The country had sanctions levied against it, and the Belgian fund Euroclear to date still holds 15 billion euros, which belongs to the Libyan Investment Authority. As became clear recently, thanks to a journalist investigations, for 6 years, supposedly by mistake, the Belgian bankers pretended that they didn't know that they had to froze the interest earnings generated by this capital. More than that, these earnings were quietly taken off the accounts and disappeared. And as far as we can tell, the amount in question is about 2.8 billion euros. This amount was just simply stolen from the Libyan people. The leadership of the Libyan Investment Authority intends to seek justice in courts, and we hope very much that they will be able to get justice, even though the fact that stealing of assets have recently become a legitimized practice by Western states. We would like to recall here that these funds were blocked not so as to punish anyone, but to safeguard them. This is the main goal of the Council here, as far as we're concerned, is to keep the Libyan amounts at the current turbulent stage, to make sure that in future they're used for the benefit of the Libyan people, as we have stated in this document on this issued by the Security Council. Mr. President, I would like to, in conclusion, say that given the critical role that UNSMIL is to play in Libyan settlement, all of the issues that we mentioned today are only worsened in a situation when we don't have a new special representative for Libya. What we need here is a consequential figure who has authorities with Libyan parties, and at the same time equidistant, which will not have its own agenda and can build a respectful dialogue with all actors. It is only under these conditions that the special representative will be able to effectively accompany the national dialogue. It's important to make sure that this person's initiatives are trusted by the Libyans, and we call on the Secretary General to intensify efforts looking for the worthy candidate which would meet all of these criteria and then would have the support of all members of the Security Council. We do hope that the transition period will not be too long, and we wish Ms. Kouri to go through this in a commendable way, and we confirm that we're interested in the closest possible cooperation with UNSMIL in New York and in Tripoli. Mr. President, I would also like to react to those who today try to use the issue of the violations by my country of sanction regime provisions in Libya. I would like to recall here that the traditionally friendly cooperation between Russia and Libya is conducted whilst taking into account all of the international obligations and is in line with special resolutions of Security Council. Using internal differences in Libya, you will not be able to use them so as to sow discord between us and our partners. But it would be much more interesting instead of that to hear from our distinguished American colleague information about the activities in Libya of the private military company Momentum. We have some information about that from their website. And according to the website, they're also working in Somalia and Yemen. According to the Libyan reporters, Momentum has intensified activities in Tripoli. And that is indeed a topic for the Sanctions Committee to consider. But our American colleagues who think themselves the masters of the world will probably not allow the experts to investigate that issue. I thank you for your attention.
Now, for starters, you will know that Libya was a country that was doing very well. Before the invasion by the NATO forces, it was doing very well. The cost of life there was leading in the whole of African continent because Muammar Gaddafi emphasized on African resources benefiting the African people. We know that Libya is one of the top producers of oil, and this oil has been used to help empowering different parts of the world. So Muammar Gaddafi took this oil and used it as a tool to ensure that Libyans got the best life that they desired. So after they assassinated him, all hell broke loose. Everything was there for the taking. All Western nations were there to take what they could and continue funding wars that continue to date. So even as we speak today, Libya is still not out of the woods. There are a lot of conflicts there. There have been uprisings after uprisings, and nothing seems to be working out. Just after the Western nations took out one of the leading Africans who aspired for a united Africa, that Africa would work and depend on itself and not Western nations. So these are some of the things that led to him being killed. So I did a little research to really get deeper into this issue, and here is what I found out. After the death of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, Libya descended into chaos and became a battleground for multiple international powers seeking influence and control over its vast resources. Gaddafi's death left a power vacuum that Western nations, particularly NATO members, exploited to gain economic and political advantage, primarily through resource extraction and financial asset manipulation. Now, on resource manipulation, this is what is recorded. Libya is home to the largest proven oil reserve in Africa, making it a prime target for Western economic interests. Following Gaddafi's ousting, foreign corporations, particularly from European countries like France and Italy, gained significant control over Libyan oil fields. Western oil companies were accused of securing favorable deals with various factions competing for power in the country, often ignoring local governance and national stability. These corporations capitalized on Libya's instability to access oil resources at discounted prices, effectively stripping the nation of one of its primary economic assets. Freezing and misappropriating assets. One of the most significant economic impact on Libya after Gaddafi's death was the freezing of Libyan sovereign assets held abroad. The Gaddafi's regime had stored billions of dollars in reserves in Europe and the United States banks. After his fall, much of his wealth was frozen under the pretext of preventing misuse by Gaddafi's loyalists. However, there were allegations that some of these assets were used to repay NATO countries for their military intervention. Additionally, a portion of the assets remained unaccounted for, raising suspicions that Western governments may have misappropriated them under the guise of international sanctions. So this is what the Russian representative was exposing, because much of the assets of Libya that were stored in countries in Europe and even in the United States were taken over by these Western nations. And I ask myself, how on earth would these countries be paying themselves for their interventions in Libya, yet their entrance in Libya is what destroyed Libya to date? Their entrance in Libya allowed them to take control of oil fields that were very lucrative and everybody wanted. So you are able to see openly that the desire for elimination of Muammar Gaddafi was not for Libyans to benefit, but for Western nations to serve their interest of taking up the largest oil reserves known within the African continent. Political and military influence. Western nations also sought to shape Libya's post-Gaddafi political landscape. France and United Kingdom and the United States played pivotal roles in supporting rival factions, not necessarily to stabilize the country, but to secure influence over its future governance. By backing specific militias and leaders, they ensured that Libya's future economic agreements, especially regarding oil and natural gas exports, favored Western interests. This intervention prolonged Libya's civil strife, leaving it vulnerable to further exploitation by foreign powers. In summary, after Gaddafi's death, Western powers exploited Libya's instability to gain control over its oils, financial assets, and political trajectory, often at the expense of Libyan people's sovereignty and economic well-being. So you're able to see that all these things that were happening, it was not for the Libyan people to benefit, but for Western nations to preserve and protect their interests. They saw that this was an African country that was going to rise beyond what they expect Africa to be. And that was a strategy to ensure that they cut the heads of any rising leader who wanted to inspire the whole continent into believing in itself and also championing for the total freedom of African people. Tell me down in the comment section what you think about this. And if you're watching us for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and also share. Thank you, and may the good Lord bless you. Goodbye.